What's going on, everyone? Roy Dean here. If you're new to the channel, I'm a 4th degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and a few other black belts as well. I'm 51 years old and I've been in the martial arts game a long time. I've traveled all over the world teaching. I've trained all over the world. I've been in many kinds of dojos, not just jiu-jitsu academies. And I feel like I have a lot of experience and perspective that I can bring to a conversation that is bubbling up right now. But it's good to be discussed at all times, and that's abuses of power. Abuses of power in a martial arts academy, abuses of power in hierarchies, and I want to have an adult conversation on this. It might be a bit meandering, since I want to interject some real-life stories. I mean, this is stuff that I've actually seen and experienced firsthand. So this video is going to be a little longer, but I feel these real-life experiences can add a little bit of shadow and color to something that happens, but it doesn't need to happen if we have the right standards and the right protocols in place that can help reduce these abuses of power. We can do better. We can do better. And I want to illustrate how destructive it can be. Not just for the victims, for the perpetrators. I mean, and of course we say, yes, they deserve to be punished too, but it's just generally a bad idea. Here we go. Abuses of power happen in all hierarchies, but not all relationships are abuses of power. Not all relationships are abuses of power. I have seen jiu-jitsu instructors and martial arts instructors marry their students and have really great relationships, long-lasting, truly, deeply, madly in love. And that does happen. However, I have also seen destructive relationships in the dojo. Students dating each other. You can have a protocol in your academies that students don't date each other. That may not be upheld. People keep things on the down low. But it is an approach to it. Teachers dating students, it really has to be love, because most of the time it doesn't work out. It can work out beautifully. And that is not an abuse of power. That is just simply two adults having a relationship. But there are abuses of power, and they happen a lot when adults, particularly in high positions of authority, and looked at as, tribal leaders, chieftains, head warrior. When these people are around minors, abuses happen, and it's quite common and incredibly destructive. So let's see how we can do better, and I want to give you some real-life examples of how destructive it can be. Let's talk about destructive story number 1. Okay. When I was 19, I was training Aikido, and I had an instructor who was great. One day, he was biking to the dojo, and I said, "Why are you biking to the dojo? You have a beautiful car." And he talked to me quite openly about how he ended up biking to the dojo. And it started with one of the students in his academy. I knew her. I saw the way she looked at him. She had been after him for a long time. She had been projecting, full-on projecting energy towards him for a year. She pursued him for a year. She was married or separated, one of the two. And he was like, "No, I don't want to date a student, don't want to date a student." He was a bachelor, and eventually he gave in. It took over a year, I remember. And then they dated, and I think once she got what she wanted, she let him go. She let him go. She went back to her husband. And he was heartbroken. He ended up drinking. He went out to a bar one night, met some people. "Hey, let's go to another bar." But he was already drunk. He got in his car. He backed into another car. They called the cops. He got a DUI. And now he was biking to go teach class. And I remember him telling me about how humiliating it was. Calling her up. He was so in love with her. Calling her up and her husband answering the phone. And him having to say, "May, speak with your wife, please." That hit him. That hurt him. That cut him deep. But that man was wounded. Wounded by love, and it was really destructive. He lost a student, he lost his license, he lost the relationship, and it didn't have to work out that way, but it did. And watching that as a 19-year-old, I thought to myself, wow, I might want to be careful. And I understood that, people project energy. And sometimes it's like throwing a rock at a bird. You just want to see if you can hit it, right? Sometimes that's how it is. You just want to see if you can get it. And apparently that's how she hit that bird. She hit that bird hard. So that's an early example of how destructive relationships in the dojo can be. But those are two consenting adults. A lot of people don't understand what it's like to be a teacher and be at the head of a class and have people bow to you, literally bow to you, and worship you. Kind of. I mean, it's not real worship, but it goes beyond professional respect. It's a heady mix of like people giving you praise and praise and praise, and you can't believe all the praise, and you're never as good as they say you are, and you're never as bad as they say you are. You're somewhere in the middle. You're just a dude. You're just a dude. But people will project energy at you, and a lot of guys are unequipped to deal with that. They don't know how to deal with it. Because, sometimes admiration can look like a crush. Especially if you're famous. Fame is a hell of a drug. Coke is a hell of a drug. Fame is a hell of a drug. Same mechanism in the brain. And people get used to doing stuff in the entertainment business. People get used to, hitting on people, being creeps, and they get away with it. Sometimes there's a reckoning years later, but a lot of people get away with it, and a lot of people stay silent. And not everybody. Most people do not report abuse. And when people do report abuse, you need to pay attention. Most people would not lie about something like that. I'll tell you, there was a situation in my own family. I understand the anger. I was very young at the time, but I understand the anger people feel when someone in their family has been abused. I spent a lot of time in the Catholic Church, walked away unscathed from that one. But I have a family member who was abused, and I remember police coming to our house, detectives, and my father, who was a World War II Marine veteran, fought in the South Pacific. I remember one morning he was shaking, he was shaking like this, eating breakfast. And I asked my mom, and she said, "Oh, he's it's called shell shock, PTSD. He went back to wartime because his daughter was under attack. And, my dad, he had plenty of guns. And, he would have just he'd like to take care of that man another way. But he couldn't do that. He was smarter than that. And, the rage turns inward and it brings you to a different place. And I understand how destructive it can be in a family. That was a family trauma. I've never mentioned that before, but this is an adult conversation. And they say every girl has a story. Of a lot more people than you think have a story. And a lot more boys and men have a story than you think. That's why it's important to just understand whether you're a teacher or you're enrolling your kids, like this stuff happens and you need to be on guard. Let me tell you another story. During the time I was in Bend, Oregon, and I had an academy for 8 years, there were 2 people that went to prison for messing around with kids in the martial arts community in that small town of like 80,000 people. One was one of my students, who was also a Taekwondo instructor. He was married, had children, very large children. They were young, but they were very large. And all of a sudden, he called me up one day and was like, Roy, how would you like to? I was still establishing my base of clientele. So he knew I didn't have an academy yet. He had an academy, and he wanted me to take over his lease. He wanted to move to New York City. Bend was too small for him. And it sounded very rushed. And as I've gotten older, I realized whenever anybody wants money really quickly, or they want to leave town really quickly, or they want you to do something really quickly, you should actually slow down and re-examine, because that's not a good sign. So I actually went over to his studio and I checked it out, and I actually agreed to take over his studio, and there was a young girl that was following him around. Beautiful. And she was just following him around, and she was doing some, like exercises in the mirror. But I thought, it was kind of weird that she was there, because it was just him, I, and her. Eventually, another one of my students prosecuted that case. She was 16. There was an abuse of power. He abused her. She was genuinely in love with him. And he wanted to skip town instead. He got prosecuted, and he's in prison. He may be out of prison now, I don't know. Another gentleman, sometime later, a few years later, another gentleman who ran a jiu-jitsu class in town and had a gymnastics academy. He was busted. People accused him. Girls accused him of abusing them. Some people came to his defense. Of course, he had a long-standing reputation in that community, and his family did too. People came to his defense because he didn't abuse everybody. And then more people came out, and yeah, he definitely abused several girls, and he went away too. And that's just in my 8 years in Bend. 2 local martial arts instructors went away for doing this. It happens. You need to be on guard. This is going to be a little bit controversial. But as part of a responsible adult conversation, it needs to be said. And there needs to be consequences for these people. There needs to be consequences for the abusers, and there needs to be consequences for the people that lie about the abuse, because occasionally that does happen. People do lie. I didn't really realize this until later in life, but it's part of the, adulthood red pill that you got to swallow. One more story. One of my students, I got a call from the police. And they asked if one of my students had been training at the academy very late at night. And I said, no, we're not opening off classes. It doesn't make any sense. And it was really weird. And this was a girl, like 16, 17 years old. And she apparently was out with another one of my students. And I don't know exactly what they did, but she didn't want to get in trouble. She didn't want to get in trouble for being out with him. So she lied and said that she was training with me. And then that didn't work. Then I think it switched to, he raped me. He raped me. That was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And he got arrested at work. He got arrested at work in front of people. They picked him up. Now, he didn't go away because he didn't do that. But, I mean, that occasionally does happen. Now, right now, there are allegations. There are allegations all the time. There are allegations all the time. This is such a destructive path that martial arts professionals need to be wary of. Whether you're a jiu-jitsu professional or a taekwondo professional or a CrossFit coach or any of these things, you have a special responsibility and you need to be held to a higher standard of discipline. I'm not holier than thou. I dated students. When I had an academy, I dated students. And sometimes it was great and we ended up being friends. And sometimes it didn't work out. And that's just... And was it destructive? A little bit destructive. That does happen. It's difficult to turn down a date when they're attractive and you're single. It's difficult to do. But those kind of adult relationships are okay. But the abuses of power, how do we fix this? How do we fix it? Protocols. Never be alone with a child or a teen. It's just not a good look. You could be accused. It doesn't matter. Just the accusation alone is enough to tank your reputation. You don't want to be accused of anything. You need cameras. You need protocols so that you're never alone. Never alone with a student of that age. And probably, alone with any student at any time, especially if they're female. If a male and female, it's probably not a good idea. You need other people in the room. You never want a he said, she said, and you never want an adult said, a child said. So we can hold ourselves to a higher standard. I've seen so many fights, so much drama over people dating each other in the dojo. It's a passionate art, but just exercise some restraint, people. Exercise some restraint. Once I made a rule that I would never date someone, even if you meet someone, and you have a connection with somebody, you don't need to act on it. Follow up later. You don't need to act on it then. I know a lot of guys do, but as a personal rule, that doesn't happen. But that's just me. I am not a saint. I'm not holier than thou. There is no judgment for people that operate differently. But for me, I find it simplified my life and allowed me to sleep a lot easier at night. So I wish the best for the jiu-jitsu community. I wish the best for people that have been victimized. I understand it's traumatic. Trauma and destruction is wrought, both in the perpetrator's home and in the victim's home. This is something that can be avoided. We need training. The IBJJF actually does a good job with their safety sport for IBJJF certification. I think that's a noble thing that they do. And I think we all need more education on how we can protect ourselves and our students by never allowing circumstances like that to happen. And instructors, hold yourself to the highest standard you can. Be the beacon. Be the representative of what you want people to be. This art is older than you. Respect it.